All right, Craig, put the drums down. Stop dancing. I don't know why you're dancing now.
Still playing. He's still playing the drums. He's been playing the drums for 5 weeks now. 6 weeks.
That's Sly Flourish's fault. Anyways, Greg, bring in the next guest. Yes, with the one with the sweatbands and everything. Yeah, that person. Hi, Jarrett.
Yeah, that's me.
Hi, Jarrett. Welcome. I'm Grumpy Dungeon Master Christopher. This is Grumpy Dungeon Master Jay, and you are
Jarrett Butler. I'm here from Dice Dungeons.
Dice Dungeons.
I know a lot about Dice Jail. Is that similar?
Similar. Historically, I've always put my dice jail at home has been the freezer. You have to put them in the freezer and put them in the freezer in front of all of the other dice in the room. So
classic. I like it. For me, it's either a dice jail, or if they're really, really bad, then it's dice execution, and they try to avoid that one.
Yes, for sure.
Jay, weren't you the one in my friend group that used to chuck them down outside the gaming store down the street in the back alley?
Yes, that's the real thing. If you're ever in Anniston, Alabama, and you're on Quintard Avenue, there have been hundreds of dice thrown down that street, allegedly.
I don't have dice jail or a dice dungeon because I just believe that die roll is the character. So if that die kills that character, then I know I should never play that character ever again. So, but that's just me. So Jarrett, I came across you and your company because of a Facebook ad that I saw for 80's Adventures, a 5th edition supplement that you guys have created, correct?
That's right. Yeah. So 80's Adventure is our second book in our lineup. It's one that we've been working on for a long time behind the scenes. And with Dice Dungeons, we've kind of always been geared towards creating products that are mostly we're creating for our own table, and then if everybody else likes it, that's even bonus, right? So 80's Adventure is one that it is fully inspired by 80's movies, 80 nostalgia, all of the pop culture and that sort of stuff infused into Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition.
Yeah, I had to say, when I saw the ad, I immediately just stopped everything I was doing. I was like, all right, hold on. I had to go out there. I had to find the link. I had to chase it down. And then the Kickstarter's not out yet, correct?
It will be launching on the 30th. So 8 a.m. on the 30th.
So the day the podcast comes out.
Yes.
Right. Well, there you go.
Perfect. I did the back end VIP backing, where I paid the extra $1 and I got the early access thing, and I was going through it, and just everything in this supplement is everything that I didn't know I wanted. Everything, I see supplements sometimes, and my wife will see a supplement and be like, "Oh, that's perfect for me," and I hadn't really hit that one yet. There was one that came out a while ago that was Zelda and Miyazaki themed, and I was that one's really nice. Yes, Obajiba, yeah. That one's really nice, and I backed that one. But this one, when this came out, this one called for me, and so when you were making this, you said that basically you played for it at your table first, and then you kind of basically just wrote it all up.
Yeah, the earliest inspiration of it is many years back. We do a lot of one-shot nights that we'll do with local bars and places around here in Baltimore where we're based. And one of the little modules that I ran at one point was very much inspired by old 80's camp movies. So I had everybody run as first level wizards. And they were arriving just off the boat for their first day of Wizard Summer Camp, where they learned their first cantrip and everything. So, and then sort of spun that out into a little bit of a oh no, the camp is in trouble financially. We need this one noble to infuse cash into us. Maybe if we win the jamboree at the end of the summer, but we couldn't win, right? Because the bards across the lake, they win every year. So that's sort of the general theme of that one, was all these like old 80s camp movies that I was like, and how much of that can I throw into one adventure? And from there, it would just sort of like, I kept, okay, well, what about other types of movies? And it all just kept spinning into very themed 80s adventures, which is what we ended up calling the book.
Oh, this is so good. I cannot wait. So, uh, I've been really just sort of put out by D&D 5e for a while now. Like I've been playing anything else I can, running anything else I can. And I've pretty much stopped running 5e altogether. And then I saw this, and immediately I was like, if anything is ever going to make me run 5e again, it's this. Because I grew up through the 80s. I lived with all of the pop culture. I know all of the movies. That's the whole reason Chris wanted me on this podcast, is my esoteric knowledge of stupid 80s films. Like this hits every note. And fortunately, the vast majority of my playgroup are also in their early 40s. So they all know the same movies that I do. So everything about this is just right up our alley.
Yeah, we definitely wanted every just constant kind of winks and nudges of like, hey, do you remember this type of thing? One of the magic items were so fun to create, because we did loads of just like anything I could remember from like 80s kid toy commercials and things. So we've got the Spring of Walking is one of my favorites. That's just activate with a magic command, and it just walks down in front of you or behind you. For a dungeoneer, it's great for setting off traps and that sort of thing. But also just a fun little guy that walks with you, maybe alone, maybe in pairs. I don't know what you're going to do with it.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I see so many because we have access to the early access preview, so there's just a handful of the magic items that we've seen, and one of my favorite ones is the hairspray of glamour. I don't even care what it does. The fact that I get to use hairspray in an 80s style D&D game is perfect, because literally everybody's hair was 8 feet tall in the 80s. It's a true thing. Like,
yeah. And it's also too, you didn't just get the items, and you also got the feel of it as well too. Like the hairspray is something that, only if you lived during a time is what you realize how important hairspray was at the time, and how we used so much of it we put a hole in the ozone, and then we had to stop using hairspray. Like that's something like it gets forgotten in history unless you were there and you captured that, which is amazing. And I do love the monsters. Well, so before we get too far into the early access preview and kind of like gushing over everything, what is 80's Adventure going to contain?
So the core of it is the book. That's going to be all of the player options. So we've got one subclass for every class. These are very much inspired, like as in all things, by the 80s. So you've got the barbarian that is a barbarian of the dance that has like this full leotard and is like dancing around the battlefield. You've got our kind of on the monk side, the Way of the Crane monk, who is going to have some really fun kind of action economy abilities. And from there, so that's the subclasses. Magic items as well, as we've been talking about, and then spells, all inspired by 80s music. So that all of the spells will have like some vein of 80s music inspiration. As well, there'll be monsters and other things as well, but it's really very, very focused on player options for the book itself. And then in addition to that, we're doing 5 modules that will come into play, and each of those modules is inspired by different movie genres and that sort of thing. So, as I said, Camp Spellbrook was that one adventure that has now kind of become one of those 5 modules.
Yeah, those 5 modules. Since I've got the early access preview, There's Camp Spellbook, Caretaker's Descent, Curse of Garnet Lake, Rhythm of Rebellion, and Wintertide Lockdown. And I posited this to a bunch of my friends. We were trying to place all of them as to what movies might have inspired them.
Right.
And the only one that we couldn't 100% say on was, I think it's Caretaker's Descent. Your party is sent to check on a winter caretaker and his family who have been eerily out of contact. That's what we thought. We weren't absolutely sure on it.
Yes. Yeah. So it's got a lot of horror elements infused throughout, but certainly The Shining is such an inspiration in there. We wanted something that was like from a different perspective of the adventurers or the ones coming in and seeing what's going on, and all of that groundwork has been laid. But at the same time, you're coming into this like haunted complex, and you get to really sort of create a dungeon environment for that. It's one of our highest level modules too, which so we were able to really play around with a lot of the undead and ghost effects of the mansion itself.
Excellent. Yeah, I don't know other people's models, but honestly, for this thing, I think that's I have to run all of those. I have to.
I just like the fact that you had a bunch. It looks like you're adding a bunch of layers as well too, and I think like the monster manual itself from the core D&D books really kind of like touches on layers, like when the monster calls for it. But are those layers, and they're kind of like just tied to a certain monster group, or are they just individual like settings that you could use to basically apply effects to for people running groups and making stuff?
Yeah, so we actually, this has been from our mutated monster book. It was a little bit of a snippet out of that. We created versatile layers so that you can attach them to any monster. I like the idea of layers being I want this guy to be the boss, right? And no matter where he's at, you're able to just attach that piece, and now suddenly he's got a little more oomph to him. It makes just more narrative sense that this guy is in charge. So we spun that off and created some versatile layers for this book that are all very 80s themed. So we do have like the mall, we've got the arcade complex, that sort of thing. So we'll have that, and then you can just not just from the monsters from this book, but any monster in D&D. If you want to throw that monster into a mall and make it the revenant of the mall, there you go.
I mean,
oh man,
are we allowed to talk about Stranger Things? I mean, because that
I think we are.
like I mean I really felt like D&D WotC as a whole, as a company, like they had some crossover with the Stranger Things and how everything was going on. They released that one module, and it was interesting to see, it written from perspective of a young kid playing like first or second edition, whichever it was. But I was really kind of surprised they didn't, go deeper into it and read like a setting book for that show. And
Right.
It felt kind of sad, but essentially this is kind of what that would be in a sense, or what I would want it to be. Not just, a small town in the middle of nowhere, but just like all of the 80s wrapped up into a single book. And like, I know I could sit down there and I could think things up, but I don't get the time for that. So I need to pull something right off my shelf and be like, okay, what is the speak and spell? What would that be kind of in the 80s? And like that was the first magic item I saw. I was just like, yeah, that I could make a whole campaign around that thing. And
yeah,
I really am looking forward to this.
It's an interesting take that honestly I rarely ever see in tabletop RPGs at all, because you have all of the like core species that you would have in Dungeons and Dragons. You can still play your Dragonborn, you can play your halflings, your elves, and everything while being in the 1980s setting. The only other time I've seen anything like that is Shadowrun.
Right. Yeah, we wanted to make it very versatile so that you can play. Sort of the core concept here is you can play your standard D&D and then just infuse as much as you want to. But at the same time, if you want to sort of like up the stakes of the technology in the world, you can kind of fast forward to more of a modern day setting if you wanted to. But it still allows you to play your standard high fantasy world, and instead of, you know, you're just sort of like infusing that sort of taverny vibe, but at the same time, now that bard's walking around with very large hair and got a kind of maybe little synthwave inspired lute, right?
Yep.
So we wanted it to be pretty easy access for however you wanted to kind of play that. Whereas like there are kind of great books and stuff for like Shadowrun, as an example of like, this is absolute a futuristic, more modern plus setting, and we wanted to be able to let people kind of pick and choose where they want to take that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I got a question for you then. So like in developing this 80s settings, what part of the 80s did you guys leave out? Like to me, like I didn't see anything referencing like guns, for example. Like,
Right.
did that factor in at all? Did you guys like decide maybe to just leave that out, or did you kind of like fall back on what the DM's guide has for guns? And like, because for me, 80s is all about the big Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone movies and stuff like that,
Right.
and lots of explosions.
Exactly. We always wanted to run it through a lens of how would a high magic, low technology world adapt to this.
Okay.
So even in some of the modules where we would kind of the easy thing would be to okay, and we have like a blunderbuss with all of these villains. We kind of instead went with more of a, well, the villains have sort of wands of magic missile, and they're low charge, kind of one and done situation. So it sort of like was easy to sort of swing that over and say, and try to avoid necessarily like getting into a mechanic situation of, you know, how are guns going to work? Do they have email? That sort of thing. And so we always sort of kept it low tech, but just replacing with either kind of a steampunk aesthetic or more of a high magic style.
Okay.
So do they have automobiles or some variation thereof?
Right. So yeah, we tended to. So we're one of the things in the inspirations that we wanted with all of the classic movies, of like the car that is kind of functions on its own in some capacity, right? Whether it's haunted or is got some robot inside, whatever. So we're working. So one of the items that we're working through is having like a stagecoach style version of that.
Okay,
That's cool. That's
as long
awesome.
as you can have your stagecoach chases, because that's very important to 80s.
For sure.
Yeah, like the 80s are also great too, because like you don't have to deal with the cell phone problem, you know. And I know a lot of people have problems with the cell phone. Like every time I watch a movie now, it's like, oh, why aren't you using your cell phone? Oh, I forgot I had it. Oh, I got hit by a rock. You always have to explain why the cell phone doesn't
all
work.
the cell phones are down in the area. Sure.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm glad that. So kind of maybe just touching a little bit on monsters in the early access preview. You have grieflings, which were amazing. The first picture of that little guy with the little tie on, I was just like, oh, I kind of want him as a plushie.
One of our artists was able to animate him for the video, and it's just a little kind of quick animation that we did. But just seeing him sort of like walk across the little mall scape is so cute.
Oh man,
that's awesome. How did you go with the monsters from the things? Like obviously there's a lot of things you could draw inspiration from, you know, Freddy, Jason, but do you go as far as like pulling in like the Aliens franchises, or like any kind of like big huge more fantastical creations of the 80s genre, or stick to more of the stuff that was like down to earth per se?
We kind of went whole cloth. So we pull a little bit from everything.
Okay.
We've got like a lot of options throughout that can be sort of the more everyday creature that you might encounter, but then we also wanted to have those big fantastical elements too. The Never Ending Story is like one that I can say like is just there's so much involved in that movie, or even any sort of Jim Henson's production as well.
Oh my God, yeah, yeah.
Wow, let's take a piece out of this and kind of what is kind of what are the core elements of this thing, and how can we sort of like kind of add this to maybe a dragon or to a more classic kind of fantasy universe version of something along those lines. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So like when you guys were designing this, was there any kind of like any kind of a major like aha moments, this would be a perfect fit, or like ones like you just couldn't get to fit at all?
Let's see. So there is The Fly is one that I still want to try to crack. Is exactly how we end up having a piece of that into a story, because that's one that I'm like that one, and definitely those that style of horror, where like even the thing,
yeah.
right, are relatively hard elements because there's so much sort of like change of creatures throughout. But we'll definitely have some piece infused in there as well.
Yeah, the thing I've seen the Thing module, like it's been done multiple times over the years, in different, like hell, I remember seeing that even in third edition D&D way back when. Like people have just made it and run it and put it out.
Yeah, I think even Ice the Icewind Dale module for 5e itself is very inspired by that. Just from that, like even just from the isolation perspective of that movie itself.
Yeah, the Fly would be an interesting one to try and do because it's just a teleporter accident gone wrong. So some wizard just screwed up in the ritual casting. And,
right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, having some special rules for teleportation that you definitely want to make sure that not two things are not involved in your teleportation without you knowing it.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the tabletop role-playing game Dungeon Crawl Classics?
A bit, yeah.
So one of the things they have, every spell has a table, and when you cast it, you have to roll on that table depending on how good your roll was. If you roll a 1, usually you just you botch the spell, your patron gets mad at you, and you might not be able to cast it again for a few hours or something. But there's nothing that says in that version of a game that you couldn't have some horrible reaction like that for just rolling badly.
Right.
Yeah. There's just so much you can do. Like it's really weird too, because like I've been running a lot of adventures and I've been DMing and I've been stuck in Faerun for who knows how long, and
forever.
Yeah. And it's weird because I never thought of taking inspiration from the 80s or even like the 90s and throwing that into my game at all. And I kind of look at this now, I'm like, why didn't I do any of this? Like like at any time, like it just seems so obvious. Like no one has really put together a book like this that I've seen, definitely for 5th edition. Maybe people have tried for other editions. Maybe it's just the right time because it's been 40 years. Oh God, 40 years.
Yeah, the nostalgia's there for sure.
Yeah. Like I think you're hitting the anvil while it's hot, or whatever that expression is. You
yeah, it's one of those things. It is certainly like when we really started kind of saying, okay, let's start crafting. There's so many just fun ideas that you can just, once you start going down the road of, well, what does this translate to? It's just so fun to start like blue skying all of the things you can pull from.
Yeah. And like even like the path you mentioned the path of dance, the barbarian subclass you guys had, and it just being like an 80s elven aerobics instructor with a giant battle axe, like that is just so simple and perfect. Like that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Like I recently had a game where I had an elf noble, a character playing an elf noble barbarian, and we had kind of joked like, oh, which is she just basically put her pinky down and set the T down and went into her rage, and that's how you knew. But then like I look at this picture, and by the way, the art, the fantastic art, all the way. Definitely give the art team my props.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Brennan, one of our artists, he's the lead artist on this, and he just does some amazing work. So we've featured him as much as we can throughout, and have little blurb for everybody to kind of like just to say like, wow, what a great job you've done on everything. Like every vision we had, seeing it now in reality is awesome, is just amazing.
Yeah, it is fantastic. So yeah, this aerobics instructor from the 80s being the barbarian, it all makes sense now. Everything clicked into place. The art you have for the orc businessman, being the warlock, perfect.
The warlock pact of greed is I haven't even read the specifics of what it does, but just that it's the patron is some greedy being is absolutely perfect. And honestly, I have a PC who became a god that's actually what he would do, because he was greedy and all of his followers are greedy. So, but yeah, it harkens of like Michael Douglas from Wall Street, or it reminds me of Vampire in Brooklyn, where with the whole "greed is good" quotes, like everything just screams very. Yeah, it works. It works great.
Yeah, we envisioned this one kind of in those aspects, having that sort of like that very like greed is good type of character, and we kind of took from there. We created a location in our location list called the Wall of Streets. We're all a big business district where everything really gets done.
Yeah, where the country is actually run from. Yes.
But that was a super fun. That was one of my early ideas that I wanted to kind of mess around with, was having a subclass that would have like a gold piece, and it's almost sort of like in the vein of how a hexblade and that sort of stuff has like their weapon as part of their patron. Well, this guy is like that. He has an actual gold piece that is his like Scrooge McDuck style. This means everything to me. So
that's perfect.
So we could honestly gush about this for a long time, because like honestly, like everything about it just makes me giddy. I feel like I'm a kid again. So let me ask you a serious question. A real address the Godzilla in the room, if I was to give it an 80s twist. How are you guys handling the new edition release, or the new personal, I guess D&D's own 5e supplement that they're coming out as the official thing?
Yeah, so that one is interesting. When we started designing this, a while back, that was such a like, oh yeah, when that happens, whatever. It's so far down the road. Now that it's coming Kickstarter time, we're like, oh, okay, this is happening. So one of the things that we're kind of doing is we have post Kickstarter, we'll have a year, and that will be sort of time for play testing, time for more art to get created, all of that sort of stuff. So we'll have a little bit of time post release to see kind of how everything shakes out. There's a lot of things that are the easy side of things that they've done in the 2024 editions that are, as far as like monster creation goes, just very light-handed changes that are easy for us to do, and it's just fully, backwards compatible, so it doesn't really matter that much.
Right.
Beyond that, it's tricky. We're the main thing, and the nice thing at least, is that because it is backwards compatible, with the older editions, whether the group is running the new style or the old style, they'll be able to slot these subclasses on top, and all that really changes is, you know, your base class, which isn't part of what we're handling either.
Yeah.
Beyond that, it's just a little bit of a wait and see as we kind of like go down the road, and kind of make sure that it ideally it works for everybody, and that's kind of what we're looking to do.
I mean, and you got the subclasses, which may be the hardest thing to kind of like make sure sync up, but I don't feel like it'd be the most difficult, because a couple level adjustments and how things get, you know, applied, and I think you're pretty golden, because looking at what I've seen with the barbarian, at least, you know, with all the new weapon masteries and whatnot, there doesn't look like there's anything too crazy would have to be done. Just a couple, you know,
right
adjustments.
And like I said, thankfully, like most of those sort of changes come into that base class, and the subclasses themselves don't address much of that weapon mastery or the mechanics that would be different. So it allows us to get to play in the space without having to make any real decision.
The warmer glowing, no need to change it. It's perfect. Either edition, you're good.
When they they put out the videos for the 2024 one coming out, like the vast majority of the issues with backwards compatibility seem to be in the classes and not so much in the other development of stuff. So like you said, probably just a few little edits here and there to the subclasses, and you should be all right.
Right. And we'll have the lucky kind of chance of being able to play test it with everybody in both systems and get feedback across the board and see what needs to be kind of, maybe there even just a few like optional kind of sidebars are easy enough to include. So.
Yeah, and that's. On our podcast, I've always mentioned that because the back end math hasn't changed, it's not really a new addition. It's really just a, you know, their own personal change on how things worked. But they did do a lot, so I'm glad that it's not going to affect you guys that much. Like looking at the Grieflings, you know, you can play that in either case, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So real quick, what is your group calling the new edition of D&D? Like for us, we've been pretty handy on 5.5, but you know, we still have some friends who are kind of all over the place about it.
I've been just calling it the 2024 edition, basically, at this point, just to make it so everybody knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Ever since we had Sly Flourish on a couple weeks ago, ever since he mentioned that people are calling it by the year, that's what I've seen people calling it by. Even on D&D Beyond, they're calling it 2014 for the old one. So I think that's how they're going to go.
Like how non-committal they are on what they actually want to call it.
Yeah, well, since they don't want to call it a new edition, they're just going to title it with a year, which is that's lame in my opinion. But
and I think the 0.5 comes with other additional baggage of like trying to explain, is it a 0.5 or is it just a little patch or is it backwards compatible, all that sort of stuff. So I get their struggles, but it's just being
in reality it's just a 5.2.
It's funny.
Yeah, it's just all of us old people, we lived through the 5.5 years, so that's what we're going with. That's what's in my head.
Right.
I grew up in 4th edition, so it was 4th edition, and then it was 4th Essentials. So I'm glad just to have numbers instead of anything else.
Yeah, 2 words is too many.
Yeah.
So I guess moving a little bit, Jarrett, about you. Like you said, you were a DM. How long have you been DMing? And give us an overview of what Dice Dungeons is.
Yeah, so I've been DMing for, let's see. It's I for so long I wanted to just be a player.
What edition did you start with? Let's go with that.
So 5th edition was truly where I started DMing, but I started in 3rd edition just before 3.5 started out. Aside from that, I think I played just a ton of Baldur's Gate before that ever happened.
Oh yeah.
So like in my brain, I was constantly like when I first started playing third edition, trying to like figure out THAC0 and how it was involved based on the Baldur's Gate game.
Yeah, they don't line up so well.
Right. But more after fifth edition is where I really started like DMing the most, and really sort of like saying, okay, I can make stuff up, I can get some rules in, sort of thing. But Dice Dungeons itself, we actually got started. I moved to Baltimore about 8 years ago, and my new gaming group that I had just started with, my business partner John, we were gifted some dice, and we basically were like, well, what if we could make some dice? Wouldn't it be neat? And that is, from there, it spun so far out of control that now we're making our second book.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the dice on your website right now, and some of these are amazing.
Thanks. Yeah, we focus really on the prestige stuff, metal dice, gemstones, glass is a little bit of a specialty of ours. And we try to just kind of do some fun things as well. We one of our first like very large Kickstarter projects that we ever did was our quest decks. So those guys are very like system agnostic, like pull it from a deck, and anytime your guys go into town, draw 3 or 4 quests out, and those are the local like side quests that they have in that area.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, that's the thing that I started doing with my own home game, and then eventually just sort of spun out into a product. That's the most often, like I said, with how the modules worked for this and all that sort of thing. It's a lot of things that are like, hey, this worked for my game.
You have a deck of wanted. Yeah, you have a deck of wanted posters.
Yes, absolutely. It's the Lost and Wanted deck that was really fun. We also got to be a little selfish and get a lot of art for our home game characters made.
Oh, nice.
Hey, we all know how that one friend that makes some official products and it gets your character snuck in there some way. That's always the best.
Right.
Yeah, Gary Gygax definitely has never done that before.
The best part is like when Crooked Moon came out with or Legend of Avantris or whatever they're called, it came out with Crooked Moon as a Kickstarter, and they were promising all these like decks and dice and all these like fancy additions and stuff like that. I was just like, there's no way they can find enough manufacturers to do all that and handle all that top end overhead of managing getting all that stuff made and pushed out in a reasonable amount of time. And they started having some delays, as is normal for every Kickstarter on the face of the planet. And then I saw your book, and then I saw that you guys kind of already make these gaming accessories. And I'm like, so these guys won't have a problem. They are the guys.
It is handy having kind of the infrastructure that we do. This is on top of everything else. Is our 15th Kickstarter.
Wow.
So we've done a couple, as well as have kind of all of the back end of, we've made the cards, we've made books before. We can certainly make dice any day of the week. So it kind of becomes an easier path for us to sort of say like, hey, we're pretty confident on everything. We do want to play test everything and make sure everything is the best it can be. And that's why we're giving ourselves a year. But we know the manufacturing side very, very well at this point.
Right. That definitely
that's
definitely a big headache.
Yeah, very, very important skill to have ahead of making a product.
Yeah. It's always there. These successful Kickstarters that do like so well, like there's so many great things, but I always am like I really hope you planned for it to be as successful as it is. It's going to be great for you, but like don't just throw money at your problem, because that's gonna be a hardship later down the road. Like just so.
Yeah. Like I'm writing a new like campaign adventure, and I don't want to put it up on DM's Guild. All the stuff that I have is currently on DM's Guild, and like I'm actually want to get an actual printed product out. And so I've started like doing my research, like how much it would cost, what would I need, and how would I need to get it developed. And it's just me, so I'm just trying to kind of figuring that things out. And then I look at Kickstarter and I look at all these Kickstarters that are out there. I'm like, that just scares me. And then to see how successful you guys have been at it is just it's awe inspiring. Like, you guys are doing a great job with it. 15 Kickstarters is a huge amount, And I can't wait. I can't wait for this one to launch, which is launching today. So sign up and
Right.
links on our Discord for all that stuff. So and on YouTube there'll be links everywhere. There'll be links everywhere. Links everywhere.
And I made it easy for everybody too. I got us 80'sdnd.com.
Wow, really?
Okay. Wow.
So you can just pop it straight in there, and yeah.
Did you buy 90s D&D and 2000s D&D while you were there?
I might have done a few things.
he's thinking ahead here. Yep.
Planning ahead. That's good.
Excellent.
Oh wow. So getting back to the 80s adventure, what was the one thing that you made or you contributed to making that just was that you were glad you finally got into the book? Like, what 80s theme or monster, or what is the 80s thing that defined the 80s for you that you got into the book?
I would say the jacket of membership is one that I really wanted, like the members only style, like that high collar kind of like cuff jacket. And so we tinkered around with it for a while and sort of like ended on a really fun note of just like this jacket that just sort of can, but like visually to anybody who's like checking you over as you walk into sort of an area will just be what they kind of think of as the official garb that you should be walking into with. So,
nice.
You run that place. You're a member. Everyone knows it. You belong there.
Yeah.
Might be a sweater vest. Might be a sports jacket with a big letter on it. Who knows?
Yeah, it's ones like that. The magic items, I think, were such a fun, like, oh, what about this? How would that become a magic item? There's just so many that I had so much fun creating.
Yeah. So as soon as we got a hold of the early access thing, like me and a few of our friends, like we just started tossing module ideas back and forth with each other based on all of the 80s movies. That you got the one where a whole team of veterans goes into the jungle, to bring back a kidnapped, prisoner or whatever, and along the way they run into this invisible monster they can't see. There's so many good movies that you could just make modules out of. There's so many great things that you can make magic items out of.
Billions. I mean, hell, that's half the movies and TV shows that are out right now.
Yeah. Very much so. And now we get it in tabletop form, exactly how we want it.
Yeah, it's so fun to see how how movies of any sort translate into a D&D game, because there are certainly things that become challenges of like, well, there's got to be at least like 4 protagonists instead of the one. So how do you how do you incorporate that? There's the combat and that sort of kind of addition if it's a place. But I've become like, I've gotten to the point now it's like really fun to see like what sort of movies is the strangest to turn into a movie, and like how it sort of can like
any John Hughes movie.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't anything that doesn't have like that absolute like narrative of like, say, like, here is how we saved the day. Is just so fun to think of as how that turns into an actual module.
Just some random rom-com.
Yeah, exactly. All the John Hughes films.
Mm-hmm.
That's a question that's gonna bug me, and I'm gonna have to sit around and ponder for a while to figure out what is the most crazy 80s movie, because you can't choose something like Red Sonja, because that's too, not 80s, even though it came out in the 80s,
Right.
So yeah, that's
the whole sword and sorcery movies from the 80s wouldn't really work so much as good modules, but
Yeah.
anything based in the 80s would.
Yeah.
Other maybe the time travel movies. I don't know about those.
And travel always hard in RPG.
But I think this is the setting for that, though. You know, because like you walk up to an arcade cabinet, and you get transported into whatever that is. Now you're in a western. You leave, and the 80s cabinet takes you now to this. So you got to kill the horrific, well, he said, revenant of the arcade. You know, that's causing all these problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the locations that we have in the book is a plane similar to the Astral Sea, but it's just a grid of purple that kind of goes on forever with like an eternal sunset in the background. And that one I think is that you always are going to get there by being transported by an arcade cabinet.
Yeah, that's definitely how you get transported there.
Oh, just so Tron works perfectly fine in this.
Right.
Man, I have to ask you a personal thing, because for me, like I said, 80s movies were always the Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, the big guns and muscles and action films, but it was also kaiju films. Were you able to work in any 80s kaijus into this?
We've certainly got a lot of the larger monsters involved, but we're saving some of the kaiju stuff for maybe some future projects. So
because I did see that you mentioned the previous book, the
Mutated Monsters.
Yeah, so I got to pick that up now.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with that one. That one is a lot of that is. Because I run for a lot of DMs who know everything, we started creating some things that were just twist on classic monsters.
Yeah.
So for Mutated Monsters, it's a lot of your classic, just regular old D&D monsters, but with some new twist. So it's really fun to sort of like dig into. Like one of my the ones that I really love is the wasp bullet.
Oh no, that sounds horrific.
Yeah, and it's actually a lower CR than the regular, so that you can have like multiples.
Yeah, you can have a swarm of them.
Right. Yeah.
Just stay away from the nest of the boulets, and you'll be fine.
Right. No, what's worse about that is like, okay, so here's a real story. When I was a child living up in upstate New York, I was running across our field, and I came running up to a tree, just one right in the center of our yard. And when I ran up to it, I heard a sound, like a vibrating, buzzing sound, and I looked down just in time to see these wasps crawling out of all these holes. And I got covered in basically the entire hive of wasps, and they stung the shit out of me. Had to go to the hospital, almost died. Horrific. So when you said wasp bullet, I was thinking that where some kid runs up to a tree and just 100 of these things just pour out and just like swamp over an entire town. Yeah.
Not good for the town. Certainly.
No, not for good. No. It was horrible.
Yeah. Sometimes little towns, they have problems with like giant worms that live underground. I don't know what this is.
It's true.
What's really weird too is I have that as a very vivid memory in my mind. Also, a very vivid memory of my mom mixing Pepsi and milk together and putting that on the wasp wounds. And I don't know why. I don't know if that's real. It could have just been, the venom of the wasp taking over. But I don't know why that one's associated there too. Like she's not a potion maker. She failed her medicine check. Whatever made her put milk and Pepsi together as a wasp's pain supplement. I don't know. That was weird.
Milk kind of makes sense, because when you drink or when you eat something really, really spicy, milk can sort of bring that down. I've definitely heard. I know
capsaicin in wasp.
I know that it's just a. Yep, that's what you would think about. I know tobacco does actually help if you put that on stings.
Well, it definitely feels like one of those classic things of like that would be something that a mom would just be like, "This is what we do."
Yeah. Well, my mother did this, and her mother did this. And
Well, guess what? It happened in the 80s, so I'm putting it in something.
Yeah.
All right, Jarrett, we're closing in on an hour, and it's been again fantastic to have you on talking all about this. I want to hear if you've got a grumpy story from your time DMing. Like you said, you've been playing for a long time. You started teaching players. I usually have a ton of stories from. I run Adventures League in my local store, and I train DMs all the time. So I want to hear a good grumpy DM story from you if you got one.
Let's see. Well, I can tell you one of my standard Sunday game. They've been so we started at level 1 and we're going up to 20. That was always the plan. But early in, they definitely had a moment where I was like that I can't stop pinching the bridge of my nose kind of moment. Like, what are you guys doing?
Yep.
Where they were hired by the Duke of this like port town to go. There had been an assassination attempt on the Duke, and all but one of the guys in this like guild had kind of gotten together and said, "We're going to take out the Duke. Let's do it." But and he got out of town, so that was the my idea on the back end was they were reaching a point where they were going to get a I wanted them to have some sort of stronghold, right? Some sort of keep. So I was like, okay, so there'll be this evacuated merchant's tower on the edge of town. They can take that over once they complete this relatively simple quest. And so they get out there and find the guy is on his estate far out of town. They go far out of town. Then they track down the guy and then decide we should hear his side of the story.
Oh no.
So they go in and they're like, "Oh, we want to talk. Let's talk." And I was like, "Okay, come inside. We'll talk." And I had had a little dungeon set up, kind of in the manor house, all that sort of stuff. I was like, "All right, whatever, let's do it." So he's a good noble. He has a relatively like they roll some insights, all terrible. By the end of it, this guy was absolutely right to assassinate the Duke. He didn't like stuff that the Duke did. We should go back and tell the Duke we're not going to assassinate this guy. So they get back into town, and then for some reason, on top of that, the bard then, rather than go straight to the Duke, they spend the night in town, and the bard then who has now decided they just don't like the Duke at all, does this like big impression of the Duke and how stupid he is.
Oh no.
It goes from you guys are going to get a little stronghold in this town. This town likes you because you've done some other stuff before, to now they're like wanted in this town. They still haven't gone back to that town yet. They're afraid of that side of the continent now because they're like they then did try to assassinate the Duke because that guy convinced them so strongly.
Oh my.
So absolutely wanted and refused to go back there. It's amazing how they just spun this into a totally different thing.
Went from heroes to criminals, and you had to rewrite your whole campaign.
Right.
That is incredible.
Yeah. So that's anytime the party says, "Well, let's try diplomacy," I'm like, "Oh, this is gonna."
We had a player who was playing a druid who I think had like an 8 charisma. Like he had an 8 or a 10 charisma. It was pretty damn low, and he just decided to always be the face of the party. And every time my character who had a high charisma or somebody else would try to talk, he would just start talking over them, and naturally he'd have to make persuasion rolls and fail every single one of them, making things way harder than it had to be. So yeah, don't ever let your players talk to NPCs.
Note to self: don't let my wife talk to the cat anymore. All right, yeah.
Yeah. Very important note. All right. So the last thing that we always like to do with our guests is we have Craig that works with us, and at some point I'm going to make him a character sheet. Probably not, but we keep talking about it, and we keep adding more and more and more to his story as to who he is. So I'll give you the rundown of at least most of what I remember, and then you get to add a piece of lore or a stat or an item or anything you want to this fella. So Craig is a full orc barbarian who plays the drums. Nowadays, he plays them incessantly. Thanks, Sly. He has a girlfriend fairy named Flicker. He has a bag of holding that is an ogre's head that usually gives him the item he's looking for. He has a penchant for expensive liquor, or honestly, at this point, it's any sort of poison. He's just sort of developed an immunity to it. And he likes to collect sharp, pointy, stabby things, specifically knives. So that is what we have currently with Craig. So if you have anything else you want to add to this guy.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. I've got my dice here in front of me.
Okay.
So I'm going to kind of roll him up an 80s adventure magic item. How about that?
Oh,
Yeah.
like a proper gamer. Have at it.
All right. Let's see if I can get the sound effect there.
We hear the clacking.
All right. 75.
Oh,
So
not a bad roll. Not a bad roll. All right.
The Pants of Featherfall.
Oh my god. Okay.
So he's got some parachute pants now. I hope that hope that works out for you.
There we go. Okay. You said Pants of Featherfall, and I started thinking, okay, is it Speedos? Is it leotards? No, it is parachute pants. It is
parachute pants.
It's MC Hammer pants.
Yep.
Oh my god. That makes it beg the question: is there just a table? You have random loot tables in your 80s adventure then?
Yes. Yeah. So we'll have kind of within there for the DM to use, and as well as in the modules, we'll have certain kind of just set up.
People
tables.
forget about putting tables in their stuff, and so that's I'm amazed to hear that.
Yeah, I am a huge fan of random tables. It's the reason I love Dungeon Crawl Classics so much. Every time you cast a spell, you kill yourself.
Well, Jarrett, it has been fantastic to talk to you. It's great. I really hope your Kickstarter goes well. You definitely have, at least from my understanding, 4 or 5 backers right from the get-go. So,
Awesome.
So definitely looking forward to that. It is out now, and it was 80'sdnd.com, right?
Yeah, you can just actually 80'sbook.com will get you there super quick, and we'll have that kind of linking straight to the campaign and everything as of when you're listening to this.
Yes, that is awesome. Well, thank you very much, and I can't wait, man. I can't wait.
Yep. Yeah. I hate that it takes so long for Kickstarters to get here. I'm ready to run it now.
but he's got a year, and he doesn't. Yeah. He's not going to have any of the problems building the stuff because he already does it. So this one will be delivered on time, right, with no problems whatsoever, right?
And we'll be doing the playtest early too, so you'll get all of the playtest information and everything in digital format very early into that year. So so you'll have your hands on a lot of things very quickly. So, but it's been great talking to you guys.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Bye, Craig.